It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Michael Farquhar. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, Douglas, thank you for having me on. It's good to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. So, let's see. You're a former writer and editor at the Washington Post. How long ago was that?
Geez, I think I probably left there right around 2000 to start writing books. I was writing history for the Washington Post, and then I just kind of segued into popular history for the general reader.
Oh, okay. And now best-selling author, numerous books. The book we're going to be talking about today is called Bad Days in History.
Well, it's actually the sequel to Bad Days in History, cleverly titled More Bad Days in History.
Okay. Well, why don't you just tell us a little about the book? It sounds like it's is it a satire?
No, these are factual historical tidbits that you undoubtedly did not learn in history class. It's the darker, more embarrassing side of the historic figures that we're all familiar with. They're having pretty bad days in any number of ways. Embarrassments, misbehavior, nothing atrocious, nothing genocidal, unless it really happened in the 900s by a Orthodox saint, Olga of Kiev. But other than that, we're keeping it on the lighter side of history, the absolutely accurate but less well-known episodes, 365 of them.
Well, I see some of them on here, on your bio, that look kind of interesting. The Beatles were attacked at the British Embassy. That one I kind of know the basic story. I know somebody came up behind Ringo and like snipped his hair, something like that. He wasn't too happy about that.
That's exactly what happened. They had just done their first show in the U.S. in Washington, D.C., and were invited to the British Embassy that evening, where you would have thought that it would have been a little more staid. But the guests at the embassy were acting like the teenagers at the Coliseum. I mean, they were swarming the Beatles, and as you said, one took a chunk of Ringo's hair out. John Lennon was so repulsed by the whole thing, he just walked out of the door and proceeded to write I'll Cry instead.
I saw some of the film clips that they have out on that, and John, you could tell, was just absolutely incensed by the whole thing with the way he was answering. It
wasn't just because of the fanatical hoity-toity of D.C., but it was the way the embassy staff was treating them. This is back in 1964, and you'll sign this and you'll like it, bossing them around, treating them like second-class citizens from Liverpool. And it was a horrible night. Each of them remember it as hideous.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think they probably felt like they had just gone back, to their roots, starting out where Liverpudlian were typically looked down upon by the upper classes of Britain. And all of a sudden they had this huge success in America, and they come here and then they go into that situation just to be treated exactly the way they were before.
Exactly. It does. Those class distinctions over there were pretty sharp and didn't disappear easily.
Yeah. Let's see, what else we got? A cranky Colonel Sanders.
This is Colonel Sanders, just a wet hen after he sold his company to a liquor conglomerate, and he was just always complaining about how bad the chicken was, and this is my name on it, and damn it, this won't do. And the New York Times did an entire profile of the of Colonel Sanders in a New York KFC, as it's now referred to, and back in the kitchen, squawking about the mashed potatoes and the coleslaw, and this shouldn't have carrots in it, and you're cooking this too long. So it was a bad day for the poor kitchen manager, and one of many bad days post-selling for Colonel Sanders.
How did you find all this information? I mean, is it readily available?
Well, it's out there. It's just I love the research, and what would happen, Douglas, is I would stumble across some little interesting footnote on something and go, oh, this merits more research. I hope it's true, A, and B, I got to talk to some sources and back it all up to tell a story. But while you're doing that, you're stumbling on 400 other things that are just, there's just so much. I mean, this is all of human history, or at least the recorded portion of human history. So there's a lot out there to be mined, but it's definitely not the history you learned in history class. So it's not your typical history. It's the footnote episodes that I think are a lot more fun and would supplement the textbooks nicely, because I think this is just human nature at its most extreme. And that's what we're trying to focus on, are just the foibles of human beings who have played some part in the historic panorama.
Well, I got to ask about this one, because according to my father, I was named after Douglas MacArthur. And on your sheet, it says a treacherous Douglas MacArthur. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, well, as you know, MacArthur famously left the Philippines, I shall return. And he left it in charge of, the Philippines were left in charge of another General Wainwright, who ended up having to surrender at Corregidor, something that MacArthur would have had to have done had he not been evacuated out. And MacArthur never forgave the guy. I mean, this is the highest-ranking officer kept as a prisoner of war, and he's finally released, and MacArthur's embracing him, but meanwhile undercutting him at every possibility. The Truman administration wanted to give him a Medal of Honor, which MacArthur, behind the scenes, strongly discouraged. So it's just a story of ego and treachery in the ranks.
You've written some other books as well, and if you don't mind, why don't we just touch a couple of minutes? Behind the Palace Doors and Secret Lives of the Tsars. Is that two different books or one book?
Those are two different books. They were published by Random House a couple of years ago, a couple of years apart. The Behind the Palace Doors focuses on the British monarchy from Henry VIII up to Elizabeth II. And The Secret Lives of the Tsars focuses almost entirely on the Romanovs, from the first Romanov, Michael, to the last, Nicholas II. There are stories and anecdotes from the reigns versus a full in-depth study of Russian history. These are the stories in which Russian history plays a background. It's more focused on the personalities. Intertwined with the events and how these guys and gals were reacting to the times or creating the times, as the case may be. It's more of that kind of bite-size, I didn't know that kind of history. Certainly people who are familiar with the Romanov dynasty would be very familiar with the episodes I described. But for your general reader that only knows a little bit, it's just a nice plunge into personalities. And of course, autocratic personalities tend to have larger personalities because there's no restraints on their normal human behavior. It just becomes extra normal and therefore extra entertaining as far as I'm concerned. So those were very popular and people enjoyed them. It's fun, I think. It's the kind of history I like reading, and certainly I like researching and writing.
Well, I like that kind of history as well. I'm particularly fond of the sort of Edwardian era. And what was interesting, because you mentioned the Tsars and the British monarchy, Nicholas II was related by marriage to Edward VII, yeah?
Yes, and first cousins with George V.
Right.
Their mothers were sisters. And the interesting story about they looked identical to one another. You couldn't tell George V from Nicholas II. No one could. And they were very close, as far as you can be in two different countries, but they would get together, their family, until the Revolution, and Nicholas II pleads with George V for a place of refuge in England. But of course, at that time, revolution was in the air everywhere, and there was a lot of anti-monarchical sentiment, and George V turned him away, and we all know what happened after that, the massacre of the Romanovs. So it's kind of a sad story between those two. It didn't end well.
Yeah, you have to wonder if George V had a lifelong regret that he essentially gave the whole Romanov family a death sentence by not bringing him to the UK.
Yeah, I think he carried it with him, but I think he really, at the end of the day, had to consider his responsibility for the British monarchy, not necessarily his own safety or anything of that nature, but will this shake the monarchy, which was already precarious at the time? Yeah, this is World War I in England and not going well, and revolution, as I said, was rife, and he made a decision that he felt he had to make, but it, horrible consequences.
Well, I know that there was an awful lot of anti-German sentiment in England at the time of World War I. In fact, to the point where he changed the name, right, from Saxe-Coburg to Windsor. And,
yes, he was the king who did that.
Yeah. Was there really...
And this, incidentally, is the grandfather of the current queen. For your listeners who get confused by the timeline, as we all do. George V was followed by his two sons, Edward VIII, who abdicated, and George VI, and then Elizabeth II, present queen.
Right, and she referred to him as Grandpa England, I think, was her nickname for him. Yeah.
Well, you're a history man, Douglas. This is great.
Yeah, I like that. I've always been fascinated by it. The one thing, though, that I was just going to say was that there was a lot of anti-German sentiment at the time going around in the UK. But was there also sort of anti-Russian? Is that why George decided against bringing his cousin and his family?
No, it wasn't anti-Russian. It was anti-monarchy.
Okay.
Monarchies were falling all over Europe in the immediate aftermath of World War I, if you recall. The Habsburgs, obviously the German monarchy, and then the Russian monarchy, and then England could have been next, and that's what was motivating King George to refuse that. He just thought, I don't want to display an over embrace of a fallen monarchy. It will show that my allegiances are to monarchs and not to men.
What I always thought was interesting is that at that point, almost all of the monarchies in Europe were related by marriage or related by blood. Kaiser Wilhelm II was the grandson of Queen Victoria. And it was sort of Albert's dream that all of the monarchies would be related, and therefore any squabbles between nations would be considered something akin to a family feud, and that they could have peace in Europe based on that concept, right? Didn't work out very well.
Right. Pipe dream, Albert.
But what I always thought was, like a what if. Because Edward died fairly young. He was, only in his 60s, right, when he died?
Yes, only king after waiting a lifetime for his mother to die, Queen Victoria. He was, I think he served
like 9 years.
8 or 9 years.
Right.
Yeah.
If he had lived another 10 years, I was wondering if World War I and subsequently World War II could have been avoided if he had stayed alive.
It's a great historical what if. He was called Edward the Peacemaker for a reason. He did have a way that perhaps his son was not quite as... George V was really shy, dutiful man, but Edward VII was a larger-than-life figure, and literally, because he was huge. And he did have that diplomacy that his son kind of lacked. Who knows what would have happened? maybe an entire two massive deadly wars would have been averted. We'll never know, but it is a great thing to ponder and explore.
Well, because he seemed to, from what I've read, he seemed to have had a control over Kaiser Wilhelm because he was his uncle. And I think Kaiser Wilhelm sort of looked up to him as an elder and respected him. Where once he died,
once he died, all bets were off. Edward considered Wilhelm the Kaiser a giant pain in the rear, and at the end of the day, this was the Kaiser was an autocratic monarch. I mean, he had almost unlimited power, except for that which was controlled. He was controlled by the military. I mean, it's often said that he started World War I, but it was he and his military. That's what dominated Germany at the time. And so he was a difficult nephew, to say the least. He honored his grandmother, Queen Victoria, for sure. He was horrible to his own mother, Victoria's daughter,
Vicky,
and Edward's son, Vicky. Yes, he was the Kaiser was he was a jackass, really. I mean, on many levels. So who knows if at the end of the day, King Edward would have been able to avert anything, given the force of the militarism that was rampant in Germany at the time, and the Kaiser's own disposition.
I always equated Edward the Seventh. I always equated Edward the Seventh's sort of larger-than-life persona to Orson Welles. I always thought there was a very similar, even in their physical appearance.
Yeah, there's something. You're right. Gosh, that is that's a great separated at birth. They just go on alike. Yes.
Yeah. And I always thought Welles could have played him brilliantly if the opportunity had ever come up.
I think that King Edward was a hail fellow, well met, but he was also kind of on the pompous side, which is just what Orson Welles could do brilliantly, and was a little pompous on it in his own right. So yeah, maybe it wouldn't have been too much of an acting stretch for him in his later years, instead of selling no wine before it's time.
Yeah, I know. I was kind of disappointed. I remember that as a kid, and I thought, and that was a real down step for him. But well, money was
just got to pay the bills.
Yeah, and when you look at Orson Welles' history, money was never something. It was something he always struggled with because he would piss off all the people, the studio heads and the executive producers of anything that were going to give him money. And he'd piss them off so much that they would pull the plug on half of his projects. And he'd always be left.
You look back on his filmography, it's not massively prolific.
No, it really isn't.
And I guess that's just the ads do pay. They can pay some bills. Although what they do these days, as you know, Douglas, they don't. A lot of the celebrities don't do them in the United States. They get a fat fortune for doing advertisements overseas, like in Japan.
Well, that's interesting.
So you don't. Yeah. So you don't have that kind of that image of wow, he's been reduced, or he or she's been reduced to this. No, they just go over there, get a fat paycheck, and come back to their artistic mode when they're in the U.S. or Britain.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, even like the first time when I heard Led Zeppelin's song "Rock and Roll" on a Cadillac commercial, and I know that Jimmy Page had to sort of answer for that because some of the real music purists said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, I mean the original sellouts.
The original, yeah.
But you can't. Yeah, I mean, I it's easy for us, I guess, to say, "What are you doing?" I mean, but who doesn't like a paycheck for nothing? Pretty much. I know that the Beatles really were good and felt very strongly about their songs being sold or used commercially, which was why Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney had such a massive falling out. When Michael Jackson bought out all the Beatles songs from under McCartney, outbid McCartney, and started selling them like there was revolution for Nike. And I guess I could see both sides. I just would find it difficult, and this isn't even from a greedy point of view, but this is, hey, I could really make my life a little easier, and the absence of money worries does make life good. then I might just sell this one off, you know. I'm sick of playing it anyway, or some justification that I might come up with. Nobody's knocking on my door for the rights to to anything.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the doorbell to ring. I haven't got the...
You know, well, we could wait together and then just huff and puff about all these other sellouts.
The Joe Rogan deal hasn't come to my house yet, so...
Yeah, well, you've got a good style. I would I imagine it may be just a matter of time. There's some good ones out there. Always good to talk to a good, well-informed voice. It makes it easier for me, because I'm much better at writing than I am at discussing. Although, talking to you, it just makes it very easy. Thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And I think on that note, we're going to have to wrap it up, because we just ran out of time. We blew through it somewhere between 1900 and 1909. They just ripped right through the time.
Right. One little episode, but there's a lot of, there really is, at the end of the day, as you well know, a lot of history, a lot of entertaining history, and this book, These Bad Days series, I think does cover a lot that will entertain people, because it's history from all different arenas of history. There's sports history, entertainment history, military, political, royal, all of that. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, Douglas. I really do.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Do you have a website you want to give out for the book, or a personal website?
Currently under construction. I think basically, and there's nothing really interesting about me except for my books. So you can find them all online, or at your local bookstore. Actually, the recent ones are at your local bookstore, online, Amazon, etc. Is the entire collection of my history, anecdotal history books.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This was fun. I like to
thank you.
Talk history occasionally when I get somebody on who knows what they're talking about. So I appreciate it. Well,
anytime you get the itch for history, let's talk again.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, man. Thanks a million.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show, Gordon Uncle John Javna. Hi, Gordon. How are you?
I'm terrific. Thank you for having me on, Douglas.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. So you are an author as well as what else? What else do you do?
Well, I am for Uncle John's Bathroom. I'm one of a group of writers, and I'm also the editor-in-chief of the publication. And I'm one of my brother and I started the business or the publication way back in the 1980s. And what else am I? I'm dad. I'm a grandfather.
Oh, there we go. See, that's the important stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. That is the important. That's what I thought of first. So.
So you've got your priorities in order. I like that. That's great. So your book is called The Greatest No on Earth, which is kind of a play on the Ringling Brothers, Barnum Circus.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. That started. We started with the title because it's our 33rd annual edition. We've been doing this since the 1980s, and the publisher thought that because there were two threes in the number, that we should do something based on three-ring circus, and so that's how I came up with the title, and that's how they came up with the cover, which is very circus-like.
Oh, I see.
But it's interesting because I think of myself as the ringmaster, of this circus that we call Uncle John's Bathroom. It takes a lot of people to put these books together, and a lot of people with a lot of experience, because what we like to do is tell stories. We like trivia, but we like to tell stories, and we also like to be silly and tell lots of, provide lots of silly information as well, and keep people interested over a long period of time. Because it's a 400-page book, it takes a long time to read the entire thing.
Is this similar on the same lines as Ripley's, Believe It or Not?
Ripley's is one of our inspirations, as was Guinness one of our inspirations, but it's different in that we don't just go for weird stuff. We go for everyday things as well, things that you might see, stories about things you might see in the supermarket, or the history behind a record album, or things that people find in the trash, or that kind of thing. We do some world records and those kinds of things, a very bizarre thing, but we also like to focus on things that have meaning to you every day, and history that you may have forgotten. That's another thing we like to do. One story in the book that sort of covers a lot of those bases is the story of a food scientist named William Mitchell. I love this story because it covers so many bases, and he worked for General Foods in the 1950s, and General Foods had purchased the Kool-Aid brand, and they wanted Mitchell to develop a carbonated version so they could compete with Coke and Pepsi for some of the soda market. And so he came up with a couple of ideas, and they both worked. One of them was carbonated ice, which worked, except and the idea was, you buy these ice cubes with a packet of Kool-Aid. You make the Kool-Aid, put the ice cube in, and you get soda, and it worked. But you had to keep it at 14 degrees in storage, and a lot of supermarkets raised the temperature of their freezer compartments to 30 degrees, which is just below freezing and cold enough for most frozen foods, but not enough to keep the carbon dioxide entrapped in the ice. And so the CO2 dissipated, and it didn't work. So he came up with another idea to carbonate the sugar. In those days, and we're talking about the 1950s, in those days, Kool-Aid was not pre-sweetened. You had to add sugar. So he figured, well, I'll add carbon dioxide to the sugar. And then he said, as long as I'm doing it, I can add the flavoring and the color to the sugar. And he ended up with a little lump of stuff that the idea was you dropped it into water and you had soda. But there wasn't enough carbonation in it to make it work. So that they had to abandon that plan. But what he did have was a little lump of carbonated sugar that when you put it in your mouth, it fizzed. It was kind of cool. He thought it was kind of cool, but the executives at General Foods weren't interested in a candy product. Still, William Mitchell kept pouches of this stuff around his office, And when visitors would come in, he'd give them a sample. They'd pop it in their mouth, and he called it atomic candy. They'd pop it in their mouth, and they'd be impressed. And it took 20 years, but finally somebody at General Foods was touring the facility and tried his atomic candy and thought it would make a great product. And that was the head of the Hostess division of snack foods for General Foods. And the only thing is he didn't like the name Atomic Candy, so he test marketed a bunch of other names, and he came up with a new one, Pop Rocks. And that started a candy sensation in the 1970s. It became a really popular candy all of a sudden, and that made General Foods think that they could develop a whole line of Pop Rock products. Like they had powdered Pop Rocks, which they were going to call Space Dust, and they thought that they could also do carbonated chocolate and carbonated chewing gum, and they didn't realize that what they had was a novelty item. And after half a dozen pouches of Pop Rocks, kids stopped buying it, and they ended up losing a lot of money on it. They sold the brand. It still exists. General Foods doesn't exist, or at least not as General Foods any longer, but Pop Rocks still exists. But what's fascinating to me is that William Mitchell developed other products that we know, such as Cool Whip and Tang. Tang, which I don't know if you remember Tang.
Oh, I'm old enough. I remember Pop Rocks. I was just thinking about Pop Rocks. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, he invented Tang too, which is basically, it's a breakfast drink, powdered breakfast drink, but it's basically Kool-Aid with vitamins added, and that became popular after NASA astronauts took it with them into space.
Right.
We all thought at the time, oh, it must be good for you, make you a spaceman. But the reason they did it, turns out, was because they took water, drinking water, in pouches, but it changed flavor when it left the atmosphere, and it was distasteful. The astronauts didn't like it, so they added Tang to the mix in order to make it more palatable. Not because it was great for you, but because they had to drink water, and that was the only way they were going to drink water. Nevertheless, it was a very popular product, and those are two of his major successes. He also had some flops. He invented a powdered alcoholic beverage, powdered vodka, essentially, which General Foods declined to develop. And somebody else came out with something called Palcohol, which is years later, and that was banned in most states in the country because they were afraid, legislatures were afraid that people were going to snort it or add it to drugs. So that never happened. But his other major success, that he and his daughter, not for General Foods but for independently, they developed a process to create rice milk, which essentially did a revolution in food products, because although that was the last product that Mitchell invented, because he passed away, his daughter continued with the work, and she came up with not just rice milk, but oat milk, hemp milk, soy milk, all of these products, which now line the supermarket shelves, all came from this one guy's idea. And next time you go into the supermarket and you see the display of rice milk or oat milk, which my granddaughters love, by the way, you can think of it's the same guy who invented Pop Rocks.
Yeah, okay, well, that's interesting. One of the ones on your bio that I wanted to ask you about, it says, did you know that you can order a Rolls Royce in any of 44,000 different colors?
Yeah, I did not know that until I found the fact. But that's one. Did you know that the Merriam-Webster and Oxford English dictionaries add new words every year? And in 2019, they added the word schleppy to the dictionary.
Schleppy. Oh.
Schleppy, which means like shabby or scrubby. Not only did they add schleppy, they added schlubby, they added schlump, they added schmoozy, and they added schnoodle. You know what a schnoodle is?
No, what's schnoodle?
A cross between a schnauzer and a poodle.
Oh, a dog breed. Okay.
Right. Yeah, dog breed, exactly. It's a dog breed, yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to imagine they've added a lot of words over the last 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
With all of the internet words that we use.
Yeah, it's one of the beauties of English language is that it changes as fads come and go, styles change, and new things get invented and new words get added to the dictionary, which is usually, I think, a step behind pop culture, but at least we have an official record of those words.
Did you know that more veggies are grown for cows than for people? I would probably have guessed that,
Sure. And a lot of, soybeans and alfalfa and that kind of thing are grown exclusively for, a lot of farmland in the United States is exclusively for livestock.
Well, I know there's several types of corn, and one is grown strictly for cattle and for pigs.
Yeah.
And the others are grown for human consumption, yeah.
So, and did you know that the guitarist from the band Queen, Brian May, did you know that he has a PhD in astrophysics?
I did know that. Yeah, I'm a big Queen fan.
Well, then did you know that he also designs sports bras?
Okay, no. Didn't know that.
Yes, in 2020 he came out with a line of sports bras that feature photographs of his guitars. He also has a guitar company, Brian May Guitars, and he came out with a sports bra that has pictures of his guitars on.
The pictures of his guitars are on the bras?
Yes.
Well, that's interesting.
Did you know that Kanye North and Kanye South are the names of parliamentary districts in Botswana, but Kanye West is not?
Is that where he took his name from?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I assume so. I haven't talked to him about it, but
I did not know that. Okay. All right. We've got time for maybe one more. You want to give us one?
Another little mini fact?
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, I'll say that, did you know that women's feet are about 2 degrees colder than men's on average?
Oh, why
of course
is
not. How would you know that? Except if your wife always says that my feet are cold and yours. It's a fact. And what else? So on Super Bowl Sunday, Americans eat more than 1 billion chicken wings.
I believe that, yeah.
Yeah, I believe it too.
Is there any reason why women's feet are colder than men's feet?
I have no idea.
It just
I have
is.
no idea.
Yeah.
Just a fact.
Just a fact. All right. Well, I do congratulate you for 33 straight editions of this book, right? Is it 33 of this book? Yeah.
Yeah, 33 is. This is our 33rd annual edition. We've done, lots of other kinds of books over the years. We've done Uncle John's book about music. We've done them specifically about history and science. We've done books about different states and children's books and so on. But we've never failed to do an annual edition of Uncle John's Bathroom Reader, and this is our 33rd.
Well, great. Well, congratulations on that. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yeah, the website has an odd name. It's hard to remember. It's bathroomreader.com.
Oh, that's pretty easy, I think. Bathroomreader.com.
Yeah,
okay, very good. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was interesting.
Want to hear a bad pun?
A bad pun? Okay, go ahead.
How do taco trucks keep warm in winter?
Don't know.
They use chicken fajitas.
Oh. Yeah.
Who invented fractions?
No idea.
Henry VIII.
I don't even get that one.
Henry VIII? The 1/8? Okay.
Oh, 1/8, Henry VIII. I get it. Okay.
I just got a raise at the crematorium. Now I'm the top earner.
Oh. They're getting worse.
He groaned. It's a success.
Yeah, they're getting worse. We better go before we go right down to the bottom of the pit.
Okay, one more thing I will tell you. One more bit of trivia as we're saying goodbye.
Okay.
Do you know that goodbye is actually a contraction? It was originally God be with you.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. Okay.
Interesting, eh?
Well, all right, Gordon, Uncle John.
I could do this all day if you want, but...
Oh, yeah, I'd love to, but, life goes on.
But then you'd have to listen to more puns like, the worst part about getting fired from my job as a guillotine operator is that there was no severance package.
Yeah, with that. Okay, thanks for coming on the show.